I would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
It's astounding. Time is fleeting. Madness takes its toll. But listen closely.
Not for very much longer.
I've got to keep control.
Let's do the time warp again. Let's do the time warp again.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of The Asylum. We are your hosts, Colin Peters here.
Hello, John Roschetta here.
Jeff Manfred.
And with us, as always, another very special guest of ours, Lord Damien McDonovan. Lord Damien!
Yeah. Hello everyone again.
And we actually have another special guest who unfortunately couldn't be with us here today, but she is here in spirit. My wife, Erin Edelstein, who is a huge Rocky Horror Picture Show fan, and she would like to give her 2 cents, even though she's not with us here. We just like to bring her input. She's a huge fan of the show and the movie. And without further ado, my wife, Erin Edelstein.
Yay!
Hey, Erin. Yeah!
Hi guys, thanks for the awesome intro. Sorry I couldn't be there. Rocky Horror Picture Show has always been a cult classic. Our generation has grown up loving this movie, replicating it, and really looking into inspiration from this movie on all different aspects: theater, film, costume. It's a wonderful movie that has really shaped a new kind of genre, in my opinion. I never have actually seen this live, so I think we are seeing it soon, so that will be exciting. But I've only seen this in the movies a couple of times, and each time just gets better and better. I'm a really big Meatloaf fan, so that was always a surprise and a wonder when I was young and he comes popping out of that fridge. But my favorite scene has always been the time warp and the dancing. When I was young, I remember getting up and dancing and singing to that with my friends, and it's always been a great memory. I always thought that the costume design was fun and makeup must have been hysterical. Each time I watch it, I think of new ways to relate, and can't wait to hear what you guys think. Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Alrighty, sounds good. Erin, thank you so much. I miss you. I love you more than John does.
No, not true. Love you, honey.
I have yet to meet her, so.
She's an amazing woman.
Yes, she is. And with that being said, yes, we are going to be talking about the Rocky Horror Picture Show today. This is a very special movie because this is actually a movie and a live show that brings a bunch of people together. It's a feel-good movie. It's actually more an event. It's a party. It's a really great...
It's a communal experience.
It is. I believe...
Exactly, it's an experience. The Rocky Horror experience is how I always refer to it as.
I've heard Tim Curry say that if you don't have a date and you go see Rocky Horror, you'll probably find a date.
You'll leave the movie with a date.
And if not a date, certainly friendships and camaraderie, and just you'll leave feeling good. Rocky Horror is nothing but a feel-good time. I mean, I cannot talk about how much this is just such a great movie to watch any time of the year for any sort of purpose. Put it on, it'll make people feel good. It'll also make people go, what the fuck? But it's a movie, so
Make
hey.
you want to dance, that's for sure.
It'll
Music
make you
will do
dance.
that to you.
It's got great music. The acting is very well, in my opinion. I know some people are iffy about it, but I find the acting fantastic. It's got great atmosphere, fantastic costumes. The music is phenomenal.
Singing is top-notch, too.
And to think, it's actually like a parody movie. It's a parody musical.
Science fiction horror classics.
This show is also very special to Lord Damien, so we figured we'll let Lord Damien take control of this show.
All right. Well, I've been involved in Rocky Horror for years. I was actually part of a shadow cast for a number of years, and if you don't know, a shadow cast is part of the Rocky experience when you go and see the movie in a movie theater. There's usually like a regional group of people, like in a particular cast, that enacts the movie in front of the movie screen, and helps along with all the audience participation. We call them a shadow cast, and I was actually in a shadow cast for a few years, and I had left and gone on to do other things. But Rocky Horror is actually how I met Colin to begin with,
and Jeff.
And Jeff. I was working at a haunted house, and afterwards, during a Halloween, I would come down to see a production of the stage production, not the actual movie, but the stage production. And I was doing the audience participation lines while watching the stage production, and got a couple of the actors very disarmed, and nearly made Brad fall off the stage at one point because he started giggling because they had not heard audience participation lines before the very opening night of their show. Like the entire cast of Rocky Virgins. For those of you who don't know, a Rocky Virgin is someone who has not seen the movie in a theater with a shadow cast. Like, even if you've seen the stage production, if you haven't seen the movie in a movie theater with a shadow cast and audience participation, you're what we in the Rocky world call a Rocky Virgin. If you've watched the movie at home by yourself or with a group of friends and you've tried to do it at home, we call that masturbation. But I started coming down to see the live show at a small community theater, and Colin and Jeff were there. John, did you come to any of those?
I don't think I was.
I don't think you did.
No,
but,
John and I didn't know each other until about 2007 or 8, I believe.
All right, yeah. So I was going down, and then Colin and I started talking like after the show, and like Rocky Horror afterwards it's a very accepting community.
Very.
Yeah. No matter how weird you are, you can find a place within the Rocky Horror community. So, within a small community theater like that, it's like there's a lot of family. So it's very easy to get to talk to people like in the audience, especially if like only one or two people are doing like the audience participation, like in a movie theater. Everyone is going to notice that person and think they might be actually part of the cast. And
I thought you were.
Yeah.
I had helped produce the show. I had done like some costuming work or some stage work, like done some set design with them, but I was not officially part of the cast. I think by the end of the show, they kind of inducted me as like an official part of the cast, or an honorary part of the cast. But now, like the very opening night, I was sitting next to the director, who also had not heard the audience participation lines.
The director
and
didn't?
no, and he was literally falling out of his seat in the audience. So Rocky Horror is an experience. It's a major thing. Like Colin was saying, it kind of has a little bit of a dour ending, but it's still very much a feel-good movie because it is just so fun. And I know you guys were praising all of the acting and the making of this movie and everything that goes into it, but I kind of have to disagree with you a little bit on some of that, because even Richard O'Brien will look at this movie and say this movie is shit. I don't think it's shit, but I think it's one of those movies that it kind of knows what it is, and it has no problem embracing that.
See, that's where I say it is a good movie. Is it technically a bad movie? Yes, because it's so off the wall. There's the plot is so like out there. Like I said, some people, especially if you don't know it, are so like, what am I watching?
It's over the top. It's melodrama. It is camp, and it is sci-fi parody. So it has all of that, but and some of it, some of it is not exactly executed perfectly. I mean, you can still look at it and say, yeah, this movie isn't all that great. This is kind of a bad movie. But the point of the movie is that it is a fun movie.
Science fiction double feature. Exactly.
It's a parody, and it's an homage to all these old science fiction films, and that is entirely the point. Like I said, it knows what it is, and it's running with it. Yeah. And the point is just to just take the ticket and ride the ride, as
Exactly.
as would be said. But yeah, the movie started out as a stage production. Richard O'Brien wrote it in London because he was working as an actor and a writer, and he came to a theater with this idea, and like it just developed. It developed very quickly. And it was very popular when it was on stage in London, and it expanded, and it moved to the West End, and then it came to the States, and then that's when they decided to make a movie out of it. A lot of the original cast from the stage production does show up in the movie.
It's Tim Curry and Richard
Patricia
O'Brien.
Quinn.
They play the same characters as they did in the show, and then Nell Campbell and Patricia Quinn. Yeah, those are the recurring characters.
When it was turned into a movie, obviously some of it was changed. Some of it was made for an American audience. As Eddie Izzard might say, it's the American guy you put in the British film so that it will sell in America. So hence we have Susan Sarandon and Barry Bostwick as our main protagonists.
And Meatloaf.
And Meatloaf, yes,
From Texas.
and Meatloaf, who was terrified of this movie because when he was cast, he really had he had a major problem with all of the homosexual undertones and the homoeroticism of the movie. But then when he saw the audience's response to everything that was happening, and it's like he totally fell in love with it the same as everybody else did. But it's become a cult phenomenon. It didn't do well when it was first put into movie theaters. It was changed to a midnight movie where it was shown back to back with another really kind of camp classic cult film now, The Phantom of the Paradise. It was like on a double feature with Phantom of the Paradise. So we had two like 70s like rock musicals that are both a little out there. Both still very, very fun movies, though. In LA, they noticed that the same bunch of people kept coming to see the movie over and over again. And then it kind of progressed into that when it was moved to New York, and it was opened in New York as a midnight movie. People started making fun of it. And then the people that started making fun of it were starting to work together, like before and after the movie, developing what they could say to it. The whole call and response thing as far as the audience participation lines. And for a little while, it was encouraged that like other people could like add to it. But after a while, it became almost kind of very strict. It's like, these are the things you say. We don't really welcome anything else into it. But most theaters that have a shadow cast now, they'll actually not necessarily they won't necessarily discourage you from doing different lines. And in fact, a lot of them will actually encourage it, because like every cast will have some of their own unique lines. As far as there are definitely still standards, like calling Brad Majors an asshole and calling Janet Weiss a slut. But like every theater and every cast kind of develops a little bit of their own script. And it's fun to see like those regional differences depending on where you're going. The movie is, of course, about Brad and Janet, who have just been engaged after attending a friend's wedding. They get engaged in a cemetery.
What better place to get engaged?
And then on their way to see a high school teacher to announce their engagement, the car breaks down and they got a flat tire. Depending on who, they actually get a flat tire, but Brad says the car breaks down. It's kind of two different things, Brad. So you're an asshole. They take shelter in a castle that they found nearby and stumble upon basically a ridiculous, over-the-top parody of the Frankenstein story. We have a mad scientist who is making a man, specifically with the intention of making him his lover. And then we have servants and musical numbers and craziness ensues as the night goes on, and Brad and Janet lose their innocence because Frank, the mad scientist, will bone anything.
Yeah. This is a tale of Frankenstein meets A Clockwork Orange in the form of like a rock opera directed by David Bowie. That's what this movie feels.
There is kind of a David Bowie connection to
is.
this film a little bit.
I had heard Tim Curry say that he had heard David Bowie's wife at the time was one of the first people to actually yell something out at the screen.
Really?
It was during the scene where Richard O'Brien is getting ready to shoot Frank, and she goes, "No, don't kill him." But that was kind of it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until New York, I believe there was
There's like a trio of people
Yeah,
in New York that
was
are
there
kind
a
of
guy
like.
named Mark Shaman?
That sounds familiar.
I know Jim Sharman
Jim Sharman's
directed
the
the
director,
movie,
yep.
but there was another guy, I believe his name was similar to that. He kind of started the whole audience participation more in the theater in New York.
Okay.
There is actually another David Bowie connection to this movie, kind of. When the stage production was created, actors were encouraged to do their own makeup. So everyone kind of looked a little different most of the time. But when they made the movie and they tried to like put everything together and like standardize it, they brought on makeup artist. I want to say Pierre LaRoche.
Yes.
Pierre LaRoche, who
Did Ziggy Stardust.
who did Ziggy Stardust, and he actually did a whole bunch of other stuff too around the same time. He was big, like in the makeup industry at the time, and he was brought on. And I think you can see a little bit of Ziggy Stardust kind of influence a little bit. That the very much stylistic approach to the makeup for the movie.
I can see it. I mean, Ziggy and Frankenfurter are two totally different things, but I can see it.
Especially when they do the floor show at the end of the movie.
Oh yeah.
With the pure white faces and like the very dark colored lines.
Mm-hmm.
It's very simple, but it's very dramatic, and it looks almost kind of like Asian inspired. They look like they could almost be in kabuki makeup a little bit, because I think that was definitely some of the influence, at least for that scene. But now, the movie has become a cult phenomenon. It plays at movies at midnight and movie theaters all around the country, all around the world. The theater that I was actually part of a shadow cast in the Lehigh Valley, at the time, before it closed down, was the longest running Rocky Horror shadow cast on the planet.
Wow.
It had been in that movie theater for about 25 years before it closed down in the very early 2000s.
Huh. That's awesome.
Now, the cast itself was not there for the 20 years. There had been various different casts there, but it was the longest running movie showing. Now I'm sure somebody else has that distinction, but I'm not entirely sure who. But yeah, so it's like Rocky Horror is a blast. It's a lot of fun to explore. It's a lot of fun to get up and participate, whether you have props or not, whether you know the audience participation lines or not. You can just listen to somebody else do it. A recommendation, though, would be to watch the movie once on its own before you show up, and then hear the audience participation. Yeah. It's good to know the movie a little bit or be familiar with it before you hear someone next to you yelling and you have no idea what the hell is going on.
I looked at it like this. The movie is kind of like listening to a rock album, and then when you go see the show live, it's like a concert. You know, everybody's just into it. You feel the energy. You feel the guys on stage. You feel the audience even participation. Because not only do they participate by yelling stuff back, and so do the actors interact with you as well, but people are dressing up for this movie and for the show. I mean, it's an all-out event. You go big and go home for Rocky Horror.
Rocky Horror was almost like comic book conventions before we had comic book conventions. Yep. This is like where cosplaying came from, almost.
Again, I heard another interview with Tim Curry. He had talked about how he had seen it and like in the theater to get the feel for the participation. And I took notes on this, that he had seen the movie in New York because he only lived like about a block away or something where the original movie theater was.
Okay.
I think the Waverly Theater, and he actually was kicked out. Because he saw the lines around the block, and he said, "Hey, I just wanted to let you guys know, I'm Tim Curry. I'm in this movie, and I'd like to come and see it." And the manager was like, "You're the third Tim Curry to call today." But somehow he got down, and he got in, and he let him know. And they saw him in the theater, and the usherette escorted him out because they thought he was an imposter. And here he happened to have his passport on, and he said, "Do you believe I'm Tim Curry now?" And they're like, "Oh, we're so sorry, Mr. Curry. Do you want to go back into the theater?" And he's like, "I wouldn't dream of it." And then another time he said was out in L.A. when he had a band. Tim Curry did record a couple albums at one point. He did have a band, and they saw it, I believe, around the Sunset Strip, or maybe it was just in L.A. Generally, I don't remember specifically. And his drummer was was the one who approached him and said, "Do we have to dress up as the characters when we go see this?" And Tim Curry said, "No, you don't, and neither shall I." And that's in a story in itself. Like the cast from the movie and the original shows have story about the events of Rocky Horror and how it's affecting their lives. I mean, the main star, the figure, got kicked out of his own movie. It's like the Charlie Chaplin story about how he was in a Charlie Chaplin impersonation contest and he came in 5th place or something. It's
That happens a lot. Cher, Dolly Parton, Lady Gaga, and Adele have all lost lookalike contests to drag queens.
What?
Yes.
No way.
Yes.
Oh my.
I've seen some Cher impersonating drag queens. You might be surprised.
I've seen the Adele. I have seen that one. That she has actually lost out to other impersonators that did a better job of being Adele than Adele did of being Adele.
wow.
I remember my first feeling for Rocky Horror when I first saw it. It was several years ago. I was a Rocky version then, and then. In 2017, I see Thor Ragnarok. I almost kind of compared the two because I say, what the hell did I just watch? But do I care? No, because what I'm watching is amazing. I said the same thing with Thor Ragnarok. What the hell did I just watch? But I didn't care because what I was seeing was awesome. I was having a good time. I was getting into the songs. I was getting into with the characters. And it almost makes you question, why does one watch Rocky Horror to begin with? You don't watch it for the plot. You don't watch it for the character depth.
Yeah.
You watch it for the atmosphere, the songs, and the music. It's like watching a Godzilla movie. You watch Godzilla so we can fight other monsters and destroy buildings. You don't watch it for the satire or the plot or the characters. You watch Godzilla to watch Godzilla destroy things.
There's so much in Rocky Horror. Like, the music is its own element. You can listen to the soundtrack and just be entertained. The movie can be its own thing. The live show can be its own thing. Hell, when I got first introduced to Rocky Horror, it was in the early 90s, and you guys have heard me tell this story before. My mom and dad were really cool with leniency when it came to movies. Like I said,
watch a lot.
Yeah, I did. I gotta say, I really appreciate how my mom and dad were like, have at it, kids. And my mom was actually the one who, with my sister Farrell and her dance partner Jenna, they wanted them to do a dance number to the Time Warp.
Okay.
And we got first introduced because I was looking at the Time Warp that they were doing in the movie, and then Farrell and Jenna were doing it for this competition and that competition. Farrell was Magenta, and Jenna was Riff Raff, and my mom made the costumes, and that was like my first Rocky Horror experience. And for the longest time, we were just watching the clips and stuff, but I kind of feel bad for Jenna because she would come over and I didn't want to be the annoying little brother, but Farrell and Jenna would watch the movie and I would want to come in and join them, and that's actually how I watched the whole movie, was with them. So I have my mom, my sister Farrell, and her dance partner Jenna to thank for my first Rocky Horror experience. And I didn't get it at the time. I mean, I still remember when I first saw Tim Curry, like, just turn around in the elevator, and I saw the lipstick, and I'm like, hey, this is a guy wearing lipstick? Is that makeup on yet? And then he marches down the aisle singing, and before you know it, he rips off a cloak, and he's in what is clearly female drag, and I'm like, okay, I'm lost now.
What do you do?
You're right alongside Brad and Janet at the time.
What's going on? What's happening?
I was in the moment with them, that's for sure.
So, all right. So we should probably talk about the actual movie, the actual story of the movie.
Let's go for it.
So we open up, of course, with the great iconic song, Science Fiction Double Feature. Originally on a stage production, Science Fiction Double Feature. It's a send up of all of these old science fiction movies. And originally on the stage production, an usherette comes out and actually sings the song. Usually played by either the same person who plays Columbia or Magenta. sometimes both. I've seen it where they actually had both of them come out and do the song together.
But I believe originally Patricia Quinn was the only one singing science fiction double feature, and that was actually what won her the part. She didn't really want to do Rocky Horror originally. Her agent had said, "Are you interested in this at all?" And she said, "Well, what's it about?" And he goes, "I believe it's about a circus." Which, it's not far off, really, when you think about it.
Different kind of circus.
And she met Richard O'Brien, and he played her science fiction double feature, and she thought it was absolutely amazing. And when she found out she got the reins to sing the song, she just said, "I'm totally on board with it" after that, because she just loves science fiction double feature that much.
As we love Patricia Quinn, she does not get to sing the song in the movie.
Yeah.
It's Richard O'Brien.
It's Richard O'Brien's voice, but it is Patricia Quinn's lips.
Yep, that's right.
I think the director for the movie insisted again that Richard O'Brien be more involved and have more screen time. I think because it's his production, he wrote it. It's his baby, so they insisted on him doing more for the movie, which is why they had him sing the opening song. But it's like there's a lot of great audience participation lines. It's like you have this just iconic image of just a big pair of beautiful red lips just singing about old science fiction movies, and also even giving you a little story about like what's about to happen. It's almost like a Shakespearean monologue in the beginning of a play. The science fiction ends. We get the credits for everybody, and the lips freeze, and it's like every time we see like people's names, it's like it's. You don't get to see like a lot of opening credits anymore where it says this is the actor and this is the part they're playing. You don't see that much in movies anymore. But Rocky Horror still did that. The song ends and the lips fade out into like the steeple of a church in the background, and we pan down to this wedding happening, and we get to see like Brad and Janet's friends get married, and then Brad and Janet, celebrating with them, and eventually, like as the crowd leaves, they get engaged.
We also see Tim Curry and company in the background. If you blink for a second, you might miss them, but they're in the background. It's kind of like because it plays on American Gothic, because they actually show that picture at the castle at one point, but that's where it's kind of paying tribute to.
Yeah, Tim Curry is like the priest that just performed the wedding ceremony, and then you have Riff Raff and Magenta and Columbia in the background, like servicing the church.
Even during that whole sequence, like as they're singing the song, and they're actually literally working behind him, switching everything from a wedding to a funeral. And I thought it was amazing because like literally just spinning the flowers from white to black, and like they're just. Janet and Brad. Wow, I just lost his name. Yeah,
say asshole.
They are doing their thing, and in the background, these three are just literally saving the church for a funeral.
Yep.
And another funny thing, you talk about the colors and the actors that are in it before we actually see them in the true form of the movie. There's a Wizard of Oz correlation with that.
Yeah.
They originally wanted to do the movie at the beginning in black and white up until a certain point.
Yes.
The actors like Tim Curry, Richard O'Brien, Nell Campbell, and Patricia Quinn, not as the characters in the show yet, are kind of like the Tin Man, the Scarecrow, and the Cowardly Lion on the farm.
Yeah.
And then it goes to Oz in the castle.
That's pretty cool.
That's really cool.
The original intention was that it was going to be black and white up until the time warp.
Yes.
And they did actually release a couple of DVD specials. A number of years ago, where they actually did that.
It's a special feature on the DVD. They wanted to actually do it in the film, but they said I think they ran out of film, or the cost was too much.
Probably to go back and forth between the color and the black and white film, which wasn't being used as much at the time and not as in demand. The black and white film would have been more expensive than the color film that they were using to begin with. So we get the wedding, the great song where we get the lines,
Damn it,
Janet.
Which is I know at least among all of my people, every time anyone just says "damn it," somebody in the crowd just follows that up with a Janet. So Brad and Janet get engaged, and then we split the screen into 4 separate but equal sections, and we show us a man with no fucking neck. The criminologist, played by maybe we want to back up a little bit. Obviously, we said Brad and Janet. We have Barry Bostwick as Brad Majors, and then we have Susan Sarandon as Janet Weiss, who then get engaged, and we then see Charles Gray as the criminologist. He's basically the narrator for the story. And originally on stage, it wasn't Charles Gray, it was the actor playing Dr. Scott. The guy who plays Dr. Scott in the movie was originally the criminologist, and they changed his role around.
That's really cool.
I remember that.
He was the criminologist for the stage production, and Meatloaf played both Eddie and Dr. Scott, because it's usually a
dual role.
A dual role for
That
the actor on
makes
stage.
sense,
Yeah. So they moved that around for the movie, and actually later on when we get to the point where during like one of the ending songs where everyone is like kind of under Frank's spell and everyone is the floor show, the floor show where miraculously Dr. Scott's legs start to work and he starts kicking. Meatloaf actually started that.
Really?
He was supposed to stay still. Dr. Scott is supposed to originally stay still in the original production, and he would break the rules, and while on stage he would just start kicking. So it carried over. It became a thing, and it carried over to when they did the movie then. But so we get introduced to the criminologist who is telling this whole story. It's like a true crime story.
Yeah.
Not necessarily film noir, but it's played out almost like a true crime story. Blasted fangs, but a musical. So Charles Gray as the criminologist doesn't actually sing anything until like one or two lines in the time warp, and then he's not even really singing. It's just a jump to the left.
Like pulling down the thing, they just to point it out too. That like, oh yeah,
right.
That's
right.
all it is.
Just
All it
do the-
takes.
Right, and of course Charles Gray does not have much going on underneath his chin, so the running gag throughout the movie is making fun of him for having no neck. It comes into play quite a lot during audience participation lines, and that's a lot of fun. And it almost feels like they kind of knew that, because the way he's shot from certain angles and the way he like half of his body is covered up by the books or something, it's almost like somebody was intentionally playing along with this. The criminologist is one of those characters that, at least in the stage production, when people do it, they can definitely interact with the audience. Probably a little more than the regular actors on stage. Okay. Because especially if it's, at least when we saw it in Reading, when we saw it at Reading Community Players, their criminologist caught on to the audience participation lines after the first week, and then started reacting and talking back to the audience. Charles Gray doesn't get to do that because it's a movie, of course. But he tells us what's going on, and he introduces us to Dr. Scott, who Brad and Janet are going to see, and then we get to see Brad and Janet driving along the street in the rain, obviously taking on almost kind of like one of those haunted house kind of aspects to the movie. It's like they're driving somewhere, the car breaks down, they have a flat tire, and then they decide to go to the castle.
A random
castle.
In the middle of
A random
the night.
castle in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere, to try to see if they can get some help.
I almost kind of wish that the criminologist introduction scene and the wedding scene, they switched, because after the Damn It Janet song, and then we get the introduction to the criminologist, it kind of slows the pacing down a little bit. It almost didn't make sense to me. If we got the criminologist first, it would have set the tone for what we were going to get for the rest of the movie. Mm-hmm. I kind of wish those scenes had switched. That was like the only thing I was noticing in the beginning.
If the criminologist had been presented like after the
first credit scene, yes.
Right.
Then we got the criminologist explaining sort of things, and then we go right into the church, and then the wedding scene, and then the Damn It Janet song.
Having two songs and an intro to the movie, it seems a little late to bring in a narrator after all of that.
Yeah.
I
wish those switched.
I can see that.
Yeah. Also, I heard that Vincent Price
Yes,
was wanting to be the criminologist because he saw the production at the West End and loved it.
Mm-hmm. Also, Steve Martin had an interest in being part of Rocky Horror.
Brad.
At least
He
the
auditioned
picture
for
show.
Brad,
He
I
auditioned
think.
for Brad, and Mick Jagger of the Rolling Stones wanted to play Frankenfurter.
Honestly, could you imagine Vincent Price playing the criminologist?
Oh, it'd be great.
It just bumps up Rocky Horror to another level then.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. Oh.
I do like Charles Gray's voice and delivery, but Vincent Price is like a hero of mine.
He's a treasured soul.
Oh
in
yeah,
my life.
yeah. But yeah, so Brad and Janet, we get another song as they're walking through the woods. Over at the Frankenstein place, there's a light over at the Frankenstein place.
It's known for Janet having the newspaper over her head as she's walking over.
Yeah.
One of the very first times that anyone was yelling something at the screen, regardless of David Bowie's wife possibly saying something, but I think that was actually one of the first lines that anyone has documented. Is yelling something at Janet for using only a newspaper instead of just getting an umbrella or something. But so they show up at this Gothic castle, which was kind of run down when they filmed there. There was a lot of leaks. In fact, half the cast developed the cold or pneumonia during filming.
The scene where you see Richard O'Brien as Riff Raff in the window, they said the floorboards had been rotted away so much that he was actually on some sort of pedestal to lift himself up. That's what he stood on during.
Well, I was going to say the floorboards giving way would explain why he suddenly sinks into the floor.
Oh, that could very well be.
It's like the audience participation line is, Riff, watch out for the quicksand, and then he starts every fucking weekend. Over at the Frankenstein place, helps set up one of those, because it's they don't know what the place is called. We just get the audience, the singers in the background calling it the Frankenstein place.
Yeah. And you only see the sign that says "Enter at your own risk," which is already you really want to go, and then
a negative telltale sign.
Yeah.
Should we really?
And they're like,
not be here?
They ask for a phone.
Castles don't have telephones.
You think this place has a phone?
And then they get to the front door, and we get a proper introduction to Riff. We get him singing during over at the Frankenstein place, but then we get him opening the door. It's that nice big creepy with the Scooby-Doo looking statue in the background. And
it was like a hunchback.
Riff, say hi.
It's like a hunchback Alan Rickman.
And really, there are so many really good introductions to the characters in this movie when you think about it. There's always the Riff, the Magenta, the Columbia, the Rocky, the Frank, the Criminologist, Brad and Janet. Dr. Scott even has.
Everyone's introduction in this movie it kind of stands out and is really memorable.
Definitely.
I think Frank's though does have the biggest outcome because
oh, of course.
Oh yeah,
he's got the best intro. Yeah, oh my god.
His foot's tapping to the beat, and then as it's coming down, and then all of a sudden he just flails the cape, and I'm like, yeah, dude.
Man knows how to make an intro.
Oh, yeah. As Brad and Janet come in, and the audience participation lines I love, Janet shaking the condom out of her hair, and Brad showing us how a butterfly masturbates, and then that great line, the audience line, describe the White House, and then we get Brad's, this is probably some kind of hunting lodge for rich weirdos. And I always add something to the end of that now. It's it's not since Cheney left. So we started saying that after the Bush administration, and then we get the introduction of Patricia Quinn as Magenta sliding down.
Ride that pole.
The banister's sticky. And then of course we do the time warp, and the time warp was a late addition to the show, but it was one of the last things he wrote for the stage production because he realized it kind of slows down a little bit there. We need something to keep the momentum going, and we need something to pad out time because it was too short. So he wrote this whole other song, and now Time Warp is the iconic song. It's you talk about Rocky Horror, everyone knows the Time Warp.
It was also supposed to be an introduction to Nell Campbell's character, Columbia.
Yeah.
Richard O'Brien and Mark Sharman were at I believe it was a cafe of sorts, and she was a waitress, and just to kill time so that she wouldn't get bored, she would sing and tap dance in front of everybody, and that was basically her audition. And they loved her so much, and they said, do you want to be in this show? And she was like, hell yeah. And they wrote Time Warp, and they put the tap dance number in, and that's how her character came to be in the show. Because really, when you think about it, you kind of don't need her, but they fit her in then.
Yeah.
I'm glad they did, because she is a fun character to watch in the show.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think
definitely.
Just her facial expressions and her reactions.
Oh,
to
yeah.
she's fantastic.
Yeah. Tim Curry, like we said, has the best intro out of anybody.
Oh, yeah.
Coming down the elevator.
You cannot top that. I mean, that's one of the best intros in movie cinema history.
And his outfit, this is the kind of movie where you have to be 100% fully committed to what you're doing. To wear that outfit, to wear any of their outfits, that's balls to the wall. You have to sing and act in these accents. His accent never gets lost. He's a vastly underrated actor. He should have been recognized more in the
Tremendously
industry. I wish
Is
he
Tim
was.
Curry really underrated, though? I mean, he's beloved by everybody.
He is beloved by everybody. I wish he
Maybe
got more.
understood.
I wish he had more opportunity. Is what I'm saying.
Underappreciated in Hollywood.
In Holly, okay.
Underutilized.
Underutilized. I mean, Clue, a great comedy with a killer cast of comedic geniuses.
Oh, yeah.
And him being the best part of the miniseries It.
Oh yes, yes. Or Darkness and Legend.
Yeah.
The only thing worth watching in that.
How dare you? How dare you insult Brown Tom like that?
I was
It's
I
so
feel like we
precious.
just had this conversation about that movie too.
I mean, not to mention like Susan Sarandon and Barry Bostwick. They're like half naked for 50% of this movie, and for them to just go full out for all this,
Oh yeah.
takes courage and commitment to do
And
this.
for the costumes, you were talking about Frank. Tim Curry actually didn't think he was going to be in drag. He thought he was going to be like lab coat Dr. Frankenstein.
Yeah.
He originally had a German accent. He
Right.
played Frank very German, and it wasn't until Sue Blaine, who did the costumes, actually brought that forward to him, and the character just sort of developed from that. And then he heard somebody on a bus,
He heard two older women on a bus in London.
and they said something like, "Do you have a house in the country?"
They're very over exaggerated kind of British accents, and that's what he went for.
It kind of had like a Queen
Definitely-
royalty.
very much,
Definitely the
very
Queen's
much.
English.
Yeah.
Very much.
And I found that interesting that, like, you'd think after hearing everything that, like, the drag would be one of the first things they say. Like, well, here's the premise, but your character's going to be in drag. Yeah, especially because, like, what was the floor show then originally going to be like?
A lot of the costumes that they used for the movie are the exact same costumes they used for the stage show.
Cool.
They actually
I
had
do
to
remember
borrow
hearing
a lot of those
That's
costumes.
good. That's good.
And actually, the corset that Tim Curry is wearing, it's like he had already worn a corset for another stage production of something else beforehand.
Nice.
And I think they went and got that, and then Sue Blaine like added to it to use for the show.
Nice.
And if you look at it, it hasn't been like ever said or really said, but I feel like his corset is actually on backwards.
Yeah, because usually the ties are in the back, right? And
The laces
somebody
are in
else
the
has
back.
to. Yeah.
Put on for you.
And as low as it is cut across the back, I feel like that's supposed to be there to help boost. But I'm not entirely sure on that. It might be it might have been made specifically for the purpose and to fit him like it does. But always to me, it looks like that corset is intentionally backwards. One of the big points of audience participation is the time warp. Shadowcasts will make people stand up in the audience and actually do it.
Yep.
Most people still will never know how to actually do it. In fact, I think some of the actors on the stage don't really know exactly how to do it quite often.
Your other left.
Right. The time warp happens and like everybody kind of just collapses at the end of it.
Yep.
And then Brad and Janet slowly back away as the elevator comes down and we get Tim Curry stepping out and then ripping off that giant silver-lined cape and draping it over his throne at the other end of the room, and we get the other, like, probably the second most iconic song from the show is Sweet Transvestite. I have not yet sung Sweet Transvestite myself at a cabaret or anything. Last October, though, I did sing Science Fiction Double Feature as my last song at a cabaret for the theater company that I've been doing some work with. So that was a lot of fun. We get Tim Curry again in drag, in ladies' underwear, and very very sparkly, very showgirly kind of drag, and then we're introduced to Dr. Frankenfurter, obviously the mad scientist for the movie, and Brad and Janet talk to him, and he convinces them to stay the night, and then as quickly as he came. No pun intended. He leaves and he goes back up the elevator. He comes down, he throws a cape off, he gets a glass of water, he shakes a couple of hands, and then he leaves. It's like this is just the pre-party. The real party is upstairs in the laboratory, and that's when we get Brad and Janet stripped down to their underwear and taken up the elevator to the lab.
That's the pull out the aces when the time is right.
Right.
Scene, when they're stripping.
Right.
Janet's on the rag.
Yeah.
And then everyone goes to the elevator and goes up to the lab, and they have like meaningless conversation during the lab. Now, I like key points of this, and I point these out when I see the movie, or I have this argument with people who are trying to defend the remake that Fox did a couple of years ago. Let's do the time warp again, back to the Rocky Horror Picture Show or whatever. What they constantly refer to Frank as him. He uses male pronouns, and while shadow casts do often, and in fact one of the first people to start dressing up as Frank for midnight movies was a woman. Frank is definitely a male character. He is a bisexual, cross-dressing, cisgender male.
Yes.
Who is also an alien. Spoilers.
Who's also an alien.
Who's also an alien. Spoilers.
If this movie couldn't get any more weird, he's an alien.
And that's one of the things that I think that the attempted remake on Fox failed to grasp, is like this character's backstory and gender and sexuality is far more complicated than just being a transgender individual. Mm-hmm. It's like Laverne Cox was okay, but no, honestly, I don't think Laverne Cox...
We don't really have to go into that. No, we really don't.
I don't think Laverne Cox was okay. Her acting was up and down and back and forth, but they failed like at that concept by trying to make it. They tried making a statement, I think, with that casting, and I feel like that statement. I feel like that statement didn't do the character itself justice.
I don't think the movie in general did any justice. The original Rocky Horror Picture Show is daring. Mm-hmm. It's bending rules. It's going against the grain in so many things. And here was here was a TV movie that took away the sexual undertones, yet it was so watered down. I kind of felt like it was also one of those things where you hear it's not okay to like show like homosexual images of men on screen, but it's okay for women on women. And they kind of pushed that a little more with Laverne Cox and the Victoria Justice part. They almost made like that sort of like homosexual combination okay.
The shock value of the original movie is that it's male homosexuality by society standards is far more shocking and kind of out there than female homosexuality. Female homosexuality almost seems to be, because it is kind of more of a fetish for a standard geared audience, you almost might say, but they'll shy away from the other side of that. And the remake that they did was like, Laverne Cox is a transgendered person who identifies, looks like, and acts like a female. So when she gets with Brad, it's not that shocking.
No.
Because she presents and looks like a woman. When she gets with Janet, then there's a little bit of shock value there, but it's almost more. It's not so much shocking as it is kind of just erotic then at that point, because the general viewing audience will unfortunately just be more okay with that. It loses its shock value. But anyway, enough the remake.
We're done with
that. Yeah.
Although I'll give the remake one good part. The opening science fiction double feature.
No, you're right.
Having the usherette come in and sing that being a departure from the original movie. That actually I thought was actually really good.
And it's actually part of the show, like the
show.
usherette and
Right.
giving that theater element and atmosphere. No, you're right. I did think that out of anything, that was probably the best part of the movie.
Yeah, I agree. So they go up the elevator and we get to the lab. And Frank has changed out of his regular drag into his mad scientist garb. And then we see all of the other the Transylvanians gathered around to watch this science experiment for the night, because that is the big event that's on the agenda. And poor Brad and Janet just kind of walk out of the elevator completely in their underwear. They're given flimsy robes and introduced to Frank properly. And he flirts a little bit with both of them, and then Riff Raff, of course, played by
Richard O'Brien.
By Richard O'Brien.
Yeah.
interrupts them, and we get on with the actual science experiment for the night, which is creating a man from scratch. Not just any kind of man.
The perfect man.
The perfect man. This is...
With blonde hair and a tan.
Muscles.
Yes. The Greek ideal, I think, is what maybe he's going for. This is when we really delve into the whole Frankenstein story, kind of, because it's the mad scientist making a person, not necessarily out of body parts, but like I said, like they don't really go into that at all. They don't really explain how he makes Rocky.
It's like how Richard O'Brien had said, and it's not explored in the movie, is technically Riff Raff
does all the work.
Does all the work and made Rocky, and Frank was just kind of like, well, like, could you make him more blonde,
do that,
or make his teeth perfect?
Riff Raff has that line that says, "Everything is in readiness, master. We merely await your word." Pretty clear jab at Dr. Frankenfurter.
Right. And also the pauses, the choice of pauses during lines. It's like people have actually come up to Richard O'Brien at conventions and said, "Did you guys intentionally leave all that space between lines and words and lines so that we could yell something?" Like people wondered, did you do that on purpose? It's like, no, I don't think so. There's no way they could have planned for that.
The participation in those pauses, it just fits so perfectly.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, just that part where, after Frank introduces himself to Brad and Janet, there is this little pause, and then people can yell out in enough time, "Frank, say something nice to the camera," and he goes, "How nice." It's like, how do they make that work?
I don't know.
The experiment proves a success. We get a giant string of anal beads descending from the ceiling, which then drop colored. Which he turns some knobs and drops some food coloring into a large vat. And actually, that vat, the tank that Rocky is in, actually has a horror movie history. It was used as props in other horror movies.
I believe a Frankenstein movie.
I think it was actually in a Frankenstein movie. Yeah, but I think it was a Hammer Frankenstein.
Yeah, it wasn't a Boris Karloff one.
No.
I believe Peter Cushing was in it.
Probably because he was in a lot of the Hammer horror films.
I don't remember the name of the movie, but I remember seeing him with
Curse of Frankenstein?
I don't know.
That was the first one they did.
It might have
1957, Curse of Frankenstein, with Christopher Lee as the monster and Peter Cushing as Dr. Frankenstein.
You wrote it down?
I said I thought I did. That's why I was quickly flipping through everything. But yeah, the only thing I did see that I wrote down was when he's actually putting the colors into that tank. It was all done at random, and the guy off stage is yelling what color. That's why he's looking all confused while everything's being poured. That's why he's rushing to do. Oh, this one.
So there's supposed to actually be an order to that?
Yeah.
Wow.
I was like, wow.
Yeah. Just
now green.
Tim Curry just gives such a joyous performance throughout this entire thing. Yeah. And then we get Richard O'Brien turning the wheel, lighting up the Doritos on the board. You'll hear me make a lot of references because they are audience participation line references occasionally. But
the plot of this movie is to have Dr. Frankenfurter get fucked.
Jeff, you got a pretty famous description of the plot.
I'm pretty sure he's versatile.
How did I say it? I said this whole plot is literally a young couple stumbles across Frankenstein making a man to fuck. And that's it. And I'm like, yeah. And to be honest, I didn't even think about this when the first time he showed it to me. I had no thinking
it's my fault.
This dude wants to make a dude to fuck. It was more or less oh cool, they're aliens and they're dressed weird. That's what I understood. That's how I understood it. And it wasn't until later when I got older I understood it, and I was like, wow, I've been watching this a lot.
Hey, that's how I was. I didn't get what was going on with Brad and Janet and Frank.
No.
I really, it kind of goes back to when I heard Nell Campbell say she showed it to her daughter at 3 years old, and she was asked, don't you think that's a little too young? And she was like, no. I was like,
she doesn't know the difference.
Yeah, and she said it's really not that risque. Really, like I said, I watched it and I was just more taken back at there's a guy wearing women's clothes, and that was the weirdest part to me. But I was just, like I said, I was a little kid. I'm a boy. I wear boys' clothes. Girls wear girls' clothes. And I was like, oh, okay.
You thought that was weird. I thought it was Riff's hair at the end.
That's one of my favorite audience participation lines. It's like, we shall return to the moon-drenched shores of our beloved planet, where men wear bananas on their heads, and women come out their ears, because Patricia Quinn is in like the Bride of Frankenstein thing with a white with a white
Yep, she's Bride of Frankenstein there. Oh yeah.
The experiment proves a success,
Right.
and Rocky, the titular character of the show, stands up out of the tank, and they take the bandages off of him, and he has his own little song to sing. The Sword of Damocles, which almost wasn't included in the movie, it was almost cut out. And it's not sung by the actor, of course.
Yeah, it's clearly ADR.
Yeah, it's added in.
It's the only song in the show that's not actually sung by the actor participating in it. The actor playing Rocky was cast basically because of his physique. He's not much of a dancer, not much of an actor. In fact, after this movie, I think he did one other thing. He had a very small role in something else, and then he just kind of faded into obscurity. He runs an antique furniture store in London, I think, or somewhere over in England. It might not be London specifically,
Gotcha.
but that's all he does.
But he's out of the film industry.
Yeah, he's out of the industry, and not like he doesn't really get interviewed a lot for anything, but.
I remember VH1 had a behind the music of Rocky Horror, and they said he declined interviewing it. And I remember Richard O'Brien even said that he apologizes if it made him uncomfortable or offended him in any way, because I don't know if he does have ill will towards it or not, but yeah, he's like, it's done, it's out of my life. Moving on.
Actually, that seemed to be a big issue with a lot of people, like with Meatloaf, Susan Sarandon. Even Tim Curry was saying like they wanted to get away from it. It wasn't until later that they actually accepted the movie for what it was.
They weren't getting royalties, I know that.
Yeah. And it was like, that's why, how did he say it? Tim Curry got chubby and plain to get away from looking like Frankenfurter.
Yeah.
Which is a damn shame.
Yeah.
It's like Tim Curry looks fantastic in this movie specifically. I would not call Tim Curry a handsome man normally, but Tim Curry in this movie specifically, I haven't really come up with a name for this yet, but Tim Curry has that thing where some people look sexier in garish makeup, like having worked at haunted houses for almost a decade, and having put makeup on people. Some people walk out of that makeup room looking far sexier in the worst makeup possible. It's like, yeah, you're okay looking, but let me draw some lines on your face and make you look like a zombie. It's like, wow, you are super hot right now. And he did like a couple of roles after this where he was still nice and thin and svelte, and he did some of his greatest acting after that. Like some of like I don't remember if he actually got nominated for a Tony or not, but he originated the part of Amadeus Mozart in the Broadway production of Amadeus, which was then later turned into the Oscar-winning movie.
Yeah.
It's one of my greatest theatrical regrets that I did not get to see Amadeus on Broadway when it aired, because it wasn't just Tim Curry. It was Tim Curry as Amadeus, and it was Ian McKellen as Salieri.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Damn.
Double whammy, man.
Yeah, really.
That's brilliant. That's all brilliant.
But yeah, Tim Curry went on to do still some great stuff. But yeah, so we get Rocky. Rocky shows up, and he's got his song "Sword of Damocles." I don't remember who they actually got to dub him. I can't remember who.
I don't know either.
I don't remember. But that's the only time Rocky actually talks during the movie.
Yeah.
It's like that's it. He's silent the rest of the film.
Pretty much.
Completely. Except with maybe a couple of grunts or anything.
the floor
no, of
show.
course he sings during the floor show. But again, he has no actual lines of dialogue throughout the movie at all. And then he's introduced, and after running around the laboratory scaring everybody, he finally settles down, and
We get Eddie, don't we?
We get Eddie then, but we don't get Eddie for another song.
Oh,
Yeah,
man.
because we get one more song. We get Frank.
I will make you a man.
Yes,
Make
Frank
you- that's
singing.
right, that's right,
Frank
yeah.
singing "Make You a Man,"
Right.
congratulating himself and his creation, and talking about how he's going to make this thing a man, in the biblical sense. And of course the audience participation lines go along with that too.
Oh, yeah.
So that's some of the more fun audience participation lines there too. They're all fun. Then we get the beeping of the freezer door opening, and
freezer door.
We can tell the meatloaf is ready. When
Actually, a fun fact about that was actually originally going to be Elvis.
yes,
Yeah,
Elvis
yeah,
was
it
interested
was.
in
It was.
doing the part.
I would have been kind of curious to see how that would have played out. I love Meatloaf's performance, but I'm like, how would Elvis would have been?
That would have been very interesting. Like, there's a lot of like alternate casting choices that would have
Yeah.
made this a very, very different show.
Tim Curry's the man, but I also think Meatloaf is also the man. His song and his voice is flat out amazing.
Oh, yeah.
For Hot Patootie.
And-
He could have easily stolen the show with that song,
Mm-hmm.
and with him on his motorcycle, and then the duo with him in Colombia. Like, his voice and his charisma in that moment,
Oh, yeah.
he could have taken the show almost like the wolf in Into the Woods. But then, of course, Frankenfurter gets a little jealous. Like, you're still in my spotlight. I gotta kill you, so I'm gonna murder you.
Right.
I'm gonna murder you and turn you into actual Meatloaf.
You're talking about Meatloaf and his singing abilities. The original Hot Patootie is kind of paced a little spread out, the lyrics. And Meatloaf was the one who started singing it fast. None of the original singers could actually fit it all in under one breath.
Right.
And Meatloaf said he could. And they were like, no, you can't. And he said, yeah, I can. So then he did. And they kept it in the movie. And now that's the...
Well, that and that's why Hot Patootie now just sounds like another Meatloaf song.
Yeah.
Like, if you listen to Meatloaf's music, this sounds like it would just fit on a Meatloaf album.
It does.
I originally thought it was his song.
It's like special guest Meatloaf.
Let's add
one
this
of
to the
one of
movie.
his songs just added to the movie. So Eddie comes out. Eddie is he's not really explained in the movie.
He's a
kind of like a
delivery
random
delivery guy.
He was a random delivery boy that showed up at the castle one night and
what's
started
he
sleeping with
delivering?
everybody.
What is he delivering?
There was a biker gang
Pizza.
in the beginning.
Is it really?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Well, there was a moment where there was a biker gang that was outside the castle when Brad and Jem were going toward. I thought he was part of that group. Was he part of that group?
Nope.
I don't know.
Nope.
There was just a random motorcycle gang that was outside at some point.
he was probably delivering Meatloaf. That's what it's coming down to.
There you go.
He's delivering meatloaf.
Eddie's delivering the meatloaf. Well, he was certainly giving somebody some meat because he was clearly boning both at least Columbia
Columbia.
and Frank. Because that's like the background to that. It's like Columbia and Frank were basically fighting over him. So Frank, annoyed by Eddie showing up, decides to actually finally get rid of him and takes a pickaxe to him. And then we hear what sounds like at least 3 or 4 different people screaming about the whole thing, even though we only ever see little Nell as Columbia is screaming her head off.
Right.
And then... And then we just kind of move on. Everyone just kind of ignores the murder that just happened.
Wait, doesn't he just like kick
savage
right back
murder.
into the old song? The,
Yes.
I make you a man.
man, reprise.
Yes.
I was like, I'm sitting there like, what? There's something weird about the end of that song. I'm like, I don't remember hearing the end of it. All I remember is the murder. Then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, I was doing this song. That's right.
Right.
That didn't happen.
He kills Eddie. He walks back over to Rocky, and apologizes, and then Rocky just flexes, and then the song goes on. And then that of course ends with the wedding procession, basically to Frank's bedroom, which is of course entirely in black with the Atlas kind of figure in the stained glass in the background. Because everybody should have their master bedroom directly attached to their laboratory.
Well, they're clearly making people to fuck. That's
This
the
is-
best way to
this
do
is a
it.
good
Just
point.
pull
That's
back
a
the
good
curtain.
point.
There you go. Let's get over there.
Roll out of bed, go to work, go back to bed.
So this is where Act 2 would normally then come in, and we get Brad and Janet shown to their separate rooms with their separate fucking necks. As we would say, because Charles Gray has no neck again, because it just keeps coming up, unlike his fucking neck. And this is where we get our evening of seduction. Not satisfied with only having Rocky, And I almost kind of wonder if he didn't actually seal the deal with Rocky at that point then.
Yeah, because where does he get the stamina to fuck 2 other people?
He's an alien.
Yeah, it's true. He's an alien, yeah.
Coke. Yeah. The answer is Coke. It was the 70s.
Coked up alien.
A coked up bisexual...
There's so much to go with it.
We'll have to expand on the definition. So probably before he could even break Rocky in, he's decided that he's going to take advantage of his house guests for the night, and we get separate scenes of Frank in the exact same room in different lighting, seducing both our heroes for the movie
in a disguise.
In a disguise, a very you would think would be a very obvious disguise, but I guess it's dark and it works for Clark Kent. So so Frank comes in and seduces Janet, dressed as Brad at first, and then then the wig comes off and he takes the glasses off, and then they get it on, and then we have a small break between the seduction scenes where Riff decides to harass Rocky, and we get our first inkling that maybe there is more to this brother and sister duo of Riff Raff and Magenta than what would originally being told. There's a lot of sexual tension between these 2 siblings. In fact, the audience participation line is when Riff finally goes up to the bedroom and Magenta's just kind of staring at him lovingly. It's like the line we always do. It's one of my favorite lines. It's like, and as he walks away, I think to myself, God damn, my brother's got a sweet ass. Okay. So Riff takes a candelabra and harasses Rocky lying on the bed, and then he breaks his chains and runs off somewhere on the grounds of the castle, and then we get our second seduction scene where Frank comes in dressed as Janet, nearly a whole foot taller than Susan Sarandon is, in a bad wig, and then seduces Brad, claiming that he's done nothing with Janet so far. Of course.
Seriously, the line that he uses on both of them is like, what if Janet sees you like this, lifts her legs up, and it's like, wait, what?
And to think it went over our heads.
The dialogue for both of those scenes is almost exactly the same.
Yeah,
it's just that Brad and Janet's names are switched.
It pretty much is.
What have you done with Janet? Well, nothing. Why do you think I should?
What have you done with Brad? Nothing. You think I should? It's the same dialogue.
Yeah, pretty much.
But so and we don't get to see the aftermath of him with Janet, though. We do get to see the aftermath of him with Brad, because Janet kind of wanders off, wondering where everybody is,
crying,
and makes her way to the elevator and goes up to the laboratory, and then finds the monitor and sees Brad smoking at the end of the bed with Frank still lying in the background. We get another song because while up there in the laboratory, she finds Rocky, who has been running around the grounds and has now come back up to the lab and is just hidden in his original tank. And we get the song "Touch a Touch a Touch Me." It's a fun number. While Janet is basically seducing Rocky, we get a couple of voyeurs, because we get Columbia and Magenta are also watching this whole thing take place from the privacy of their room.
The one line that she delivers when she first meets Rocky is that she doesn't like a guy with too much muscles. Yet she has no problem banging Rocky Horror later on.
Oh, later. Yeah, no, of course.
But she likes one really big one.
Yes. I didn't make him for you. She gets him anyway. So they get it on, and for some reason we get the rest of the cast involved in the orgy for a moment, because as they're going at it, everybody else decides to show up and sing a line from the song towards the end of it, and then we get a break for a moment, and then we get Brad, Riff, and Frank come up in the elevator. Frank is giving Riff a beating, and probably not the kind he likes. And then Brad kind of looking at him is like all mournful. It's like, he doesn't beat me like that. And then from there we get our introduction to another character, Dr. Scott.
Dr. Scott.
Who on the stage productions usually played by the same actor who plays Eddie, but we get Dr. Scott in a wheelchair, who they bring in after insisting that Dr. Scott is probably working with the government on UFOs.
Naturally.
Of course. They use like this giant magnet to bring Dr. Scott upstairs as it just conveniently rides up all of the steps in a circle around Columbia and Magenta in their own room, and then upstairs, and then through the wall.
Yep.
Because there's no actual ramp or door anywhere else in this thing.
Well, the funny thing is, the builders forgot to build a second door. The elevator was the only way into the lab, and they're like, oh, well, I guess we're just going to bust through the wall. What?
That doesn't make sense. Architectural sense.
That's like, fuck it, right there.
Yep, right there. Just get a nice big Kool-Aid Man entrance. Oh, yeah! Dr. Scott! And of course, we get Great Scott, the line
Toilet paper.
Toilet paper. One of the other great things about the audience participation line for this show is, of course, the ability to throw things into the audience. We prefer
Rice. That was one of them.
Rice, confetti, toast, toilet paper, all kinds of things. Most theaters won't let you use lighters or squirt guns during the light over at the Frankenstein place.
I mean, makes sense.
Because, water and fire in a movie theater is probably not a good idea.
No.
Fuck it, let's do it. No.
They'll usually make audience participation bags, like prop bags, and they'll put tiny little dollar store flashlights in them.
Gotcha.
Cards, rubber gloves.
So we get Dr. Scott, who's got a German accent, which comes into play a little bit later when they imply something else. But he meets Frank for the first time and is surprised to see Brad, who was actually on his way to see Dr. Scott to begin with. So everyone is reunited, and we get the Rocky Horror Musketeer roll call with Brad and with Janet and Rocky showing up in the sheets in the same lab, and then everybody else showing up, and a gong going off, and we have dinner coming up. So
I find it hilarious that Brad looks like he's pissed off at Janet
when he's just done the exact same thing.
Yeah. It's like
because Janet did it twice. He only did it once.
Oh, but he doesn't know she did it twice.
Does he?
I would think not, because
he doesn't know about Frank doing it.
Yeah,
Doesn't know about
he did say promise you won't tell, and Frank kept his word. At least that we saw in the movie.
Oh yeah. He doesn't tell either one of them about the other. And then
I just slept with your boyfriend. Oh yeah, I slept with your girlfriend. Oh no, absolutely not.
Well, no, that's exactly what's missing here. He should be telling both of them so that they can just have a threesome. So we get to dinner, and Dr. Scott, for some reason, has 7 forks on the table. How many? It's like 7 forks.
7 forks.
It's like that's actually the line. Why does Dr. Scott have 7 forks? Because he hasn't ate yet.
Oh, it's so cheesy.
Yes.
So cheesy.
There's a lot of dad jokes. There's a lot of puns.
That is definitely a dad joke.
There's no such thing as a bad pun except for a pun that doesn't make sense. The dinner becomes a slight birthday party as we celebrate Rocky, and Frank puts on a tiny little hat, and everyone's got little noisemakers, and then he just kind of cuts the happy birthday song short because he's just pissed at everybody. And then Dr. Scott sings his song, Eddie's Teddy.
And that's because we find out that Dr. Scott came to the castle because Eddie is his nephew.
Mm-hmm. And wrote him a letter saying that there's some weird shit going on here. Come get me. Come figure out what's happening. And then at the end of it, there's that line that's like when he threatened your life with a
switchblade knife.
With a switchblade knife. It looks like he pulls a ballpoint pen out of the back of the teddy bear. It is actually a butter knife, but the angle of it is just so awkward that the way it shines, it just looks like it's a small ballpoint pen. Just before that is when we get Dr. Frankenfurter referencing Dr. Scott's real name of Dr. Von Scott. Oh. And of course, being the 70s, it's like, possible Nazi tie. It's like, he's got a past.
Yeah.
But then we have a Dr. Frankenfurter. It's like also clearly German.
Yeah.
But he's an alien. So.
He's an alien. He's an alien.
Yeah.
Which we don't know yet, of course. Well, we kind of know now because Riff almost kind of gave it away. You know this happening. To cut the song short and cut the party short, Frank, of course, pulls off the tablecloth, and we see the remains of Meatloaf, of Eddie in a coffin underneath the glass table.
I can't tell if it's supposed to look that awful looking, but it looks so incredibly fake.
It looks like a very bad prop.
It's a really awful looking prop. Like they just like found a bunch of stuff and just threw it together. Like that kind of looks like a person, right?
Kind of.
I was like, were you trying for realism or not really?
I don't think they were. I think they were trying to get that cheesy effect because, like, if you look at it, like you said, it doesn't look like it's real.
It looks like nothing.
It's like, well, the slab of meat that they have is supposed to be him, and it's like, what part of the human is
slab?
It's
roast.
It's a rump roast. Eddie, get your ass off the table. It's a rump roast.
Everyone's reaction to him pulling that off was real because the only people that knew about it was Tim Curry, Meatloaf, and the props department.
That's right.
So when they ripped that off, and they're like, "Oh shit, that was real."
Well, see, now there's the other question: why did they use like a fake body? Why didn't they just put Meatloaf in it?
I don't know.
I want to put like makeup on half his face or something. Just
something. Maybe
it's like they got him. Oh, that's possible.
Columbia, of course, sees this as upset, and she storms out.
Oh, of course. Oh. We get more of the backstory with Eddie about how they were a thing before Frank decided to
horrifically
murder on him, but then also experiment on him using his brain for Rocky then too. And then of course I love the audience participation line when he pulls the thing off because we get a Fight Club reference now because that's the other great thing about the audience participation lines is that they evolve with time as people add stuff. So you pull that thing off of the table and we see Meatloaf on his name is Robert Paulson. His name is Robert Paulson.
Stop it.
And then of course in reaction to this, Janet kind of comes around and runs into Rocky's arms rather than Brad's. And then they run off, and then Brad and Dr. Scott follow them because with Brad taking off his glasses to do a lot of movement. Because he's a dumbass, and then all following up with a song. I can't remember what the name of the song is called.
Planet Schmanet.
Planet Schmanet.
That's Janet Weiss.
Right. The song's just called Planet Schmanet. As everybody chases each other back up to the lab, and the only people who use the elevator are Brad and Dr. Scott because he's in the wheelchair. Everyone comes in through the hole in the wall up top. Yeah. And then Frank, of course, like freezes everybody because he's just that's it.
I've had enough Medusa, of this. Right? Like the Medusa them.
Yeah. It's like the Medusa Ray or something. I don't remember exactly what it was.
The head nod, the switch, Medusa.
The Medusa transducer.
Right.
Medusa transducer.
Yeah. Right.
Okay, right.
And then everyone is just, a plaster cast of themselves.
While a Greek god or goddess. That's what it looks like.
Columbia shows back up, yelling about like Frank has been like spurning her for Eddie, and now he's onto something new. And even when he's got his brand new toy, he's still screwing around with all these other people.
And Brad and Janet are these geeks and nerds.
These nobodies.
Yeah, right. and he created the perfect man, and it's like, okay, I had him. Now I'm gonna go back to like.
Right.
Low level.
Right.
Pretty much.
Oh god.
So they freeze Columbia as well, and then Frank laments whether or not he should have split Eddie's brain between his two creatures, between Eddie and Rocky. So Rocky does literally only have half a brain. I'm not sure which half of it is.
I don't know.
Magenta and Riff demand an explanation. It's like, what the heck are we doing? We have a mission here. What is our mission? We're never really given a clue as to exactly what the mission is. Is the mission to make a man? We're never really told exactly what the aliens' purpose is.
Is the mission to go back home?
It is now.
Yeah.
When shall we return to Transylvania?
1 week from Wednesday, bitch.
Magenta's eye makeup is so heavy that when she closes just a tiny little bit, it's like she looks like she has no eyes.
I do remember Farrell and Jenna pointing that out even then, and we're like, looks like she's ready to fall asleep.
Yes, and of course she's doing that. It's like you can tell she's losing interest in whatever the heck Frank is saying, as Riff is there, kind of just stroking her arm. It's like I want to kind of meme that. It's like Stroke's arm in incest. It's like, okay. And then we get our criminologist back. We've seen him once or twice, and then we move on to the floor show. Rose tint my world in the floor show.
This is where it gets even more interesting.
Now, I couldn't, with Columbia's part in the dance, was it a wardrobe malfunction or were her boobs supposed to be out?
I have a feeling it was probably just a wardrobe malfunction.
Okay.
I don't know,
The whole scene was thrown together very last minute.
Okay.
Like the choreography for that, they had only learned within the first hour before filming it.
Oh, wow. Okay,
Which
that's fast.
seems strange to me, because wasn't there any kind of choreography for this point in the stage production?
I don't. Besides Time Warp,
Yeah,
You know-
but that's also why the dancing for this scene looks like absolute crap.
Because everyone else is like, keeping their clothes intact, but then like you can tell like her corset or her outfit is like coming apart.
She also had a little bit more to fit into that corset than the others
That's
did.
true.
I mean, Susan Sarandon wasn't exactly terribly busty.
give it time.
Right.
But I also heard that Nell Campbell had a thing for flashing people, so
Well, you can almost see it on her face, like she's very frustrated that it's fallen down. She's trying to adjust it as she's moving onto one side of the stage.
Yeah.
So it's definitely just a wardrobe malfunction.
It definitely seemed like it when I saw it.
Oh yeah, yeah. So then floor show happens and Frank joins them and we get the RKO.
well, we should
radio
describe what the
picture.
floor show is. Frank puts them all in drag that he wears
Yes.
while they're still in the frozen statue state. And that's where you talked about the makeup on the faces. That's where this comes back into play. And it's on Columbia, Brad, Janet, and Rocky. And when they get unfrozen, they're all totally in this like hypnotic state of like euphoria. Like they're all fans of Frank now. Nobody's mad. They're all just like embracing
Change.
change and like what he represents basically. They're like his new minions now.
Yep.
The RKO Tower. RKO Tower and the pool right there.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's very kind of old, like 50s or 40s musical.
Don't dream
It's
it.
like
Be
just
it.
suddenly there's a pool. Suddenly there's a pool, and we have showgirls dancing in the pool.
And there's an orgy.
Yes, we have an orgy in the pool.
The plot has built to this moment.
Yes. We finally get an orgy for the pool with all the people that Frank definitely wanted to screw.
And he did.
And he did. And
Which is impressive.
Which is then they get out of the pool and they dance strangely because again
Oh, and
just choreographed.
There is nobody there to perform to.
Yeah,
the
it's a
audience
floor
is
show.
empty.
It's
The
a floor
theater's
show.
empty.
But even all the Transylvanians that were there for the experiment in the beginning of the movie, they're gone. They're gone. There's nobody here. We're just doing this for
Why are you
ourselves.
performing without an audience?
We call that actor baiting. We coined that term after watching a college Renaissance club attempt to act. They're doing it primarily just for themselves, and they're not very good. So we called it actor baiting.
Oh yeah.
I think after the orgy, that's when we get Riff Raff and Magenta bursting through the door. That's when we have Magenta looking like the Bride of Frankenstein with the hair slicked back, and Riff Raff has got like
gold padded tunics and
he's got like a laser pitchfork.
good heavens, it's a laser. So Riff and Magenta show up, break up the tree, insist that they're taking over now, and we're flying this ship back home to their planet, Transylvania. Transsexual Transylvania?
Transsexual Transylvania.
So before they leave, Frank convinces them that he just wants to sing one more song because he's convinced that he's
That'll
going.
win 'em over.
They're all going back. He's just going home.
Right.
And that's a great final song too, with the going home. It's very heartfelt. It's a tender moment. You don't see a lot of those in the show.
No.
You don't.
Well, the only other thing closest to a tender moment that would have been in the show was a song that Brad sings in the stage production, but they cut from the movie.
Once in a while.
Yeah, once in a while. It was recorded, but it wasn't added to the movie, or it was taken out. So we get this tender moment with Frank yet again singing to literally no audience. Although an audience appears for the sake of Frank's delusion. Riff finally completely turns on him and and insists that he's not coming back with them because he's being executed. When I said we were to return to Transylvania, I referred only to Magenta and myself.
Everyone else, you're getting kicked out.
Yeah, pretty much. You're getting kicked out or you're getting shot. That's it.
Yeah.
So Riff shoots Columbia, who is operating a purple onion. He shoots Frank, who made the mistake of trying to climb over a curtain rather than just ducking under it, and then shoots Rocky several times, hitting him directly and doing no damage, and then shooting the RKO tower, which then causes Rocky and Frank to fall into the pool, I guess drowning them? It's like he can take 5 laser blasts to the chest, shoulders, and back, but he
being wounded and then I guess drowning. I guess he drowned.
Yeah, they didn't teach him to swim.
No.
His name with a name like Rocky.
But he was in the pool.
Oh.
He was already in the pool.
Well, he was clinging on to everybody.
That's true.
He was born like what, 2 hours ago?
Well, it was the line. I'm just 7 hours old.
7 hours old. That's it. Yeah.
So they die. Brad, Janet, and Dr. Scott are told to leave as Magenta and Riff prepare to take the ship, which is the entire castle. The whole house blasts off underneath a small rainbow as they blast off and return to their beloved planet. Before we get like a miniature clip show as they do a brief time warp reprise, and we see clips from the first version of it, the movie. And then we get a song that's oftentimes cut out of the movie for theatrical showings is Superheroes. Brad, Janet, and Dr. Scott kind of crawl and stumble towards each other in the fog as they're singing about their experience and how it's kind of left them like broken and shattered and with so many questions like how do they continue on. And then we get a nice little spin out as we move back to the globe in Charles Gray, finishing out the story, who continues with Superheroes, but usually the actual song like of Brad, Janet, and Dr. Scott is like cut. It's like we just see the swirling. It's like I don't know why they bother cutting that sometimes.
I don't know why either.
I felt it added, it's not like the best of closures, but I felt like it added something. It gave like an opinion of Brad and Janet at the end of the movie and how they felt. And even though like that's going to be like a really awkward situation, because before it was like, oh, you just cut to them crawling and it looks like, well, that's it.
Are they going to recover from this?
Yeah. And at least like they kind of like recognized what happened and they got out of that trance.
But they're very different people now because of it. Yeah.
Doesn't the original production in Janet give the ring back to Brad at the end?
I know I've seen
the original production.
I've seen it several times where she gives the ring back to Brad at the end.
Okay.
And they just walk their separate ways.
Just changed forever.
Yes. Until the sequel. Well, the side movie. Side movie. But yeah. So and then we get another rundown of science fiction double feature as the credits roll, and we get pictures of the cast. That is Rocky Horror. There's so much history and backstory to the making of the movie altogether. It's like we've just run down the plot and we've talked about little things here and there, but
and audience participation, some of the best lines, because that is the good way to watch it.
That's the other thing. Like superheroes. If I go see a new Rocky Horror show and they don't have superheroes, I don't come back to that show because I love that song, and I love some of like the audience participation lines in that scene alone. Some of those are absolute golden. During that scene is when I nearly got a brand new Brad to nearly fall off the stage during our show. It's like one of the lines that Brad sings is I've done a lot, God knows I've tried. But in between there, the audience participation line is, can you suck your own dick? And then Brad goes, oh, God knows I've tried. And you could see it on the guy's face. He had never heard that line before that night, and he was trying so hard not to crack up.
That's amazing.
But it's a blast, and like you hear horror stories about the making of this movie, how everyone caught like pneumonia and the cold.
Susan Sarandon got pneumonia, I think, too, and worked through it.
Wasn't during the pool scene?
Yeah, during the pool scene.
I heard all of them say that they did not like filming that scene because they were all naked, the floor was wet, it was damp. I mean, I can understand why it would just be like, oh man, do we got to do this? Because there are pictures of them behind the scenes where they're in robes, and it looks like, I would assume they're drinking something hot. Because, I mean, if they're that bad, you need something.
Right.
The castle that it was filmed in was like in a decrepit state too, so it was cold. There was no
talking about the floorboards
being
partially damaged or not even in there.
Now it's a hotel. It's a bed and breakfast.
It's Oakley Court in Windsor, London.
Awesome.
It was actually the same location they filmed Brides of Dracula and When the Screaming Starts.
Another interesting fact is the skeleton clock before they do Time Warp. That was a real skeleton in that casket.
Out of everything that is being said, that's the one thing I can believe.
The horrifying thing is that buying a real skeleton was cheaper than buying a fake skeleton.
Yeah.
That's the most horrifying thing.
I said, look at Poltergeist.
And if you guys notice, Frank has a pink triangle on his lab coat, and I believe that was supposed to be a symbol for, like, gay pride.
During the Holocaust, during World War II, LGBT individuals in concentration camps were singled out, whereas as the Jews got the yellow star, homosexuals got a pink triangle. So during the 70s, when the gay rights movement really started to pick up a little bit more, people started adopting the pink triangle as like a symbol of power instead. They were trying to reclaim it.
They turned a negative into a positive.
Yeah.
It's not used so much like anymore. It's because we've got the rainbow and the flags now and everything. But that was one of the first like, pride power symbols that the gay community had.
And that was a big staple for the movie. Tim Curry and the cast had said that a lot of times people were like questioning their sexuality, and it actually took Rocky Horror to bring it out of them. And the cast had said they're really proud about that. It makes people comfortable and. They're much more open and okay with who they are. I found that very fascinating, and I thought that was really cool that this movie had such a positive effect when before it looked like a clusterfuck of a movie that wasn't going to go anywhere. And not only is it just this like fun off-the-wall event, but it has a meaning for a lot of people that changes their lives and changes it in a positive way.
Oh yeah.
Like you don't think about it when you first hear Rocky Horror, and it's like, oh, that movie changed my life in such a good way, and you're like, that movie?
That movie? What the hell did you just watch? What is this about?
Did we watch the same movie?
Right. Because it's got a message that appeals to people about being true to yourself and exploring who you are and letting everything out. It's a message about self-acceptance and. Yeah, and that appeals to a lot of people, not just the LGBT community. I mean, that's what it ends up going towards more so because of Frank's pansexuality or bisexuality or however we want to refer to it. I mean, he's an alien, so is he bisexual? Is he pansexual? I don't know.
Hey, because he's an alien, he has an excuse. I mean, Tim Curry had even said when people approached him about what was it like dressing in drag as the costume, and he said, well, because he's an alien, it doesn't really matter. He said, that's what he wears in Transylvania.
Right.
He said, so really, to him, it's like, it's not a costume, it's just what they wear out there.
Yeah, exactly. One thing I came across, another criticism I came across, was that someone said, I forget who it was, but he said the music numbers sound the same. Now, I don't understand this, because each song has its own characteristic, and bottom line is that musicals are supposed to have the same tune to a degree in their canon. Look for example at Pirates of Penzance. It would be like if musical composers Gilbert and Sullivan decide to take their comedic opera and say, well, the music's good, but needs a tap dance routine and number to make it different, so it doesn't sound the same as the others. That will make it good, right? No, it'll stick out like a sore thumb and be the worst.
Right.
It's like any piece of music in a rock album has to have the same vibe.
And when you change a musical too much, where you try to make every song like completely individual in its own style, you end up with Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat.
I mean, this musical paved the way for a lot of other musicals that follow the same kind of horror vibe. Like look at Carrie the musical, or even more underground stuff like Evil Dead the musical.
Evil Dead.
And Fallen Angel. I mean,
I would almost call Carrie more underground than Evil Dead the musical at this point.
Evil Dead has the splatter zone.
Yes.
When Ash is hacking the zombies, the Deadites, up into pieces with the chainsaw, there's that section of the audience where they just get splattered with guts and blood. It's so cool.
Evil Dead's another one of those fun time shows that, oh gosh.
Oh man, Bruce Campbell saw the opening of that in New York and died laughing. He thought it was the funniest thing ever.
It's, to tell you the truth, it's probably my favorite version of Evil Dead is the live musical.
What the fuck was that? Your sister has turned into a zombie.
and I want to say that Rocky Horror really was like the first like horror sci-fi like related musical.
I think it was.
I could see that.
I want to say it, but I'm not entirely sure because again, it was being played almost around the same time as Phantom of the Paradise. It's like those two came out around the same time, and there are some similar themes there, and it's got a very 70s look to it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. It does.
Although I gotta say that it looks like it could be a throwback movie. It's another thing with like the quality of how it was filmed. Mm-hmm. It looks like you could have made it now, but it takes place in the 70s, like a period piece. Right. Like when I first saw it, I found out that the cast was a lot older than what they were. I was kind of surprised by that because I was like, wow, this movie doesn't look like it's old, really. Like it took place in 1975.
Right. No. Right. I mean, and the movie itself doesn't. It almost looks like it would take place in the 50s to begin with. It doesn't look like the 70s. It looks like the 50s, which gives it that kind of timeless feel a little bit, like Tim Burton's like Batman '89. Mm-hmm. It's like everything looks retro, and that somehow makes it timeless.
But, yeah.
And that's the other great thing about Rocky, because it can be adapted. At least if you're doing like the stage production, you can update it. It can happen now. You don't have to go for like the exact costumes. Like every stage production does like its own thing with it a little bit. A lot of people try to stay kind of true to it, but a lot of people update it and it works fine. Mm-hmm. Unlike the Fox.
The Fox one.
The Fox one.
Yeah, that's where I want to give another shout out to the Bucks County Playhouse. They stick to the roots. They give little twists here and there, but for the most part, the outfits and costumes that they have are spot on. It's Brad. It's Janet. It's Frank. It's Rocky. There might be little updates here and there, but Bucks County Playhouse is so good with their stage, their costumes. It really is an all-out event, and that's why I'm so happy that every year they do it, and Rocky Horror is still one of its best shows.
They've been doing that since I was in high school. Since like the early 2000s, they were still doing Rocky Horror every year.
So if anybody out there listening, if you want to take a trip to a really neat city, it's called New Hope, Pennsylvania. Check out the Bucks County Playhouse, and we highly recommend the Rocky Horror Show there.
And if you're in the Lehigh Valley, you can see Rocky Horror the last Friday of every month at the Steel Stacks, the Frank Banco Alehouse Cinema in Bethlehem. And the same cast, I don't know if the same cast is doing it now. They've recently changed shadow casts. They used to also perform it at the Emmaus Theater in Emmaus during one Friday or Saturday during the month too, and I don't remember which one it is. I'll have to look that one up. But so like the same cast does do the movie twice a month in the Lehigh Valley at least. So you can always check those out too. There's no matter where you are, there has got to be a Rocky Horror somewhere near you. If you haven't seen it, go see it. Like I said, it's a complete experience, whether you're brand new to it, whether you're a virgin, and yes, your cherry will be popped at the beginning of the movie. Like whether you've seen it 100 times or it's your first time seeing it in the theater. It doesn't matter. It's always a blast.
It's a communal experience.
Mm-hmm. Like we said, you'll meet new people and make new friends. I mean, that's where we got to meet Lord Damien. That was 2006? And look how long, we've been friends for.
Yeah,
since and we've done projects together.
Yep.
We got to meet some interesting people like Wes Troop from the show.
Yep.
Jen James was another one.
Wes was the Brad that I almost had fall off the stage in my mind. Yes. Rocky Horror as an experience, I mean, it's a community. Rocky Horror is its own community, and it's very welcoming. It's very accepting. And you can always have a good time at Rocky, and you can come away from it like even not with other people like in the Rocky community, if you just dip your toe into it every once in a while, you can still come out of it with some really great relationships and friends and colleagues. And
I can't say enough about this movie and the show and what it's brought.
I would say we've said plenty. I mean,
Yes,
we've said almost
we definitely
everything.
have said plenty. I mean, favorite scene for me personally is just the time warp into introduction to Frankenfurter's character. If I had to pick one scene that was the favorite, it's just the time warp, dance number, and then the introduction to Tim Curry. The best.
I like looking at Susan Sarandon in her bra, so...
So Touch Me is your favorite.
Yeah, I like that.
like
But,
that
I mean, you can't deny how great Sweet Transvestite was and how Tim Curry's entrance is just like the most iconic part of that movie. And it's Tim Curry. I mean, you can't deny the man's talent. He's just oozing charisma, and he's Tim fucking Curry.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'm gonna go with Introduction to Meatloaf and his song because I really enjoy that one.
That is a great one.
Hey, dude, just him riding around the lab and the fucking motorcycle and
Like
everything.
I said, he could have had the opportunity to steal the show with that song. He could have, but then he got killed.
Right.
Over jealousy.
Over jealousy.
But I have to go with John though. I think my favorite scene is the introduction of Frankenfurter. He comes down in the long black cave and then turns around and it's like, it's gay Dracula. It's like, but I'm gay Dracula. God damn it. No. But yeah, that is like, it's one of the most iconic introductions of a character in like cinematic history. And again, Tim Curry just oozes confidence and sex appeal, and it's like he just makes an impact and he leaves, and it's like, I think that's for me that is definitely still my favorite scene.
It's better to burn out than fade away.
Absolutely. It's like, way to make an entrance. Always make a great entrance.
And it is one of those things. We use that as an intro for your show.
We recreated the cloak.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Of course, we knocked part of the ceiling off then too.
And it worked for the
It worked.
keg. I honestly don't have a least favorite scene in this movie. I can watch it from beginning to end without a problem. And I also got to say, I want to thank my Aunt Nancy because she talked about this movie on the show with me and how she was part of the audience participation. I want to thank my mom for having Farrell and Jenna do the dance. And I also want to thank Farrell and Jenna for letting the annoying little brother watch the movie with them. And even watching them dance, because I think it's a memorable part of their life. I mean, I still remember a couple years ago, I sent them a Facebook message around October, and I said, do you guys still do the time warp this time of year? So, shout out to Farrell and Jenna. Thank you guys so much. Sorry if I was annoying.
What are you, winning an Oscar? Thinking everybody like that?
We're gonna have to play you out soon.
Cue him off.
The wrap it up box.
It holds a special place in my heart, and it was memorable.
That's awesome. Yeah, I don't think I have a least favorite scene at all either. I mean, just in terms of issues, I guess just like character depth maybe could have been there a little bit more present, if anything. But in terms of scenes, I don't really have a least favorite that come to mind. Like, I don't like that one at all.
If anything, it was when they didn't have superheroes, but then when I found out they did, it was like, okay. I think a Rocky Horror without that is bad. Yeah. But now that they have it and they have it in, it's like, okay. Because it's not even that long or that important of a song, but, I guess it is, because I'm saying without it, it's not that good.
It gives an ending.
I don't know if I really have a least favorite. I mean, I feel like it kind of slows down in the second half a bit.
Yeah, pacing
like
drags.
Like kind of leading up to the dinner, maybe the criminologist's like lines just before the dinner. I feel like that's probably like the slowest part of the movie. Yeah. So it's like oh, I can stop paying attention for a little bit here. Like you can tell in the theater too. Even the audience participation lines kind of slow down and trickle off a little bit here and there. But that's all it is. It's just a little bit slower. Yeah. And that's the only reason I can think of why it would be like my least favorite part to the show.
Actually, I got nothing. There's really nothing I can bitch about right now.
Yeah.
And you guys know I love to bitch, apparently. But if I got nothing to bitch.
Alrighty.
So, to wrap this up, we just want to say we all enjoy this movie. We recommend everybody going into it with an open mind.
Absolutely.
Yes.
If you got any issues with homophobia, just stop. grow up, enjoy the ride, and just have a damn good time. Because that's what this is. It's an event. It's a party. I mean, shit, I have memories now from single digits. I've made friends, and every year I go to Bucks County Playhouse in New Hope to see this show. It just goes to show how impactful this thing is. So, cheers to Rocky Horror.
Exactly. And also, please follow Lord Damien McDonovan. And also give us a like on Facebook and Twitter as well. We'll be posting our videos on YouTube. Please hit that like and subscribe button.
Anyway. We all need more subscribers.
So with that being said, we shall sign off. This is Colin Peters.
John Rashetter.
Jeff Manfred.
And Lord Damien McDonovan.
And we shall see you all for a new session in the asylum.
Please, somebody help me.